isu tinoti mutambo wematongero wenyika, mutambo wetsiva yemazano, yema-ideas, yema-thoughts. Let's have a clash of civilization and values.
Zvapera kuti nyika yedu yevanhu vedu veZimbabwe vakuziva kuti nyika inovakwa nevanhu.
Motsanenyu wana babai, ndimi makaramba kuteerera mashoko, zinodiwa namusiki, chonaika zvaitanika.
These are the conversations that matter. These are the conversations that we bring you as Zimbabwe faces another election this year in 2023, most likely around August, from August 20 to about around August 25. Because the law says for the delimitation boundaries to be used in an election, it has to have been gazetted 6 months before the poll. Now, the delimitation report was gazetted on February 20, which means it can only be useful if elections are held as from August 20 going forward. Now, as we prepare for these elections, we have seen a lot of questions being raised around party politics, policy, and where and how the people are going to fit into this jigsaw. Now, there has been political gamesmanship, and we have been hosting political leaders and political parties on this, the Free Talk, the alternative voice for the people of Zimbabwe. Now, join me just after this break as we talk to one of the leading, or supposedly viewed as leading contenders in this upcoming elections. This is the Free Talk. Welcome back, and thank you very much for joining me on this, the Free Talk, in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation. And I'm your host as usual, Dara Blessed Mhlanga, and we talk politics on this hot seat. Now, joining me for this session is the CCC deputy spokesperson, and we're going to be discussing and interrogating the CCC, the structureless CCC. The policyless and ideologyless, as some have said, but we want to hear from them. Do they have a structure? Do they have a policy? Do they have an ideology? And what can the people of Zimbabwe look to get out of voting for the CCC? Now, thank you very much, Ostalosi, for joining us here on this, the Free Talk, in proud partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation.
Thank you very much.
Beautiful. Now let's just get into the meat of it, Ostalos. Maybe you can just start by telling us the CCC policy and ideology.
Thank you very much. The CCC, as you know, was born out of the need to respond to the national question in this country. CCC is born out of the collective aspirations of the ordinary people. We traversed Zimbabwe, particularly in the countryside, in 2020-21 to try and look at the question of convergence. That Zimbabwe facing the immediate crisis of legitimacy, the crisis in the economy. The key question was, in our respective view, the need to converge Zimbabweans across walks of life. And our convergence and conversations with different stakeholders in Zimbabwe unanimously agreed that there is need for an alternative vehicle that is able to jettison new politics in our country. And one of the central questions we gathered across the entire country was the need of putting citizens back at the center of decision making in our country. So the response by Citizens Coalition in its formation is to make sure that we bring back ordinary people who have been relegated out of the politics of our country, be it in the economy, be it in the politics, be it in the making of any decision, whether it's in local authority and everywhere. So Citizens Coalition for Change was born to respond to that national question as it was posited by different stakeholders that we conversed for. And therefore, CCC coming into the political landscape in this country was obviously intending to make sure that when we resolve the economic and the political crisis, how does it transform the concrete lives of ordinary people? So at the center of the Citizens Coalition for Change is the agenda and the objective to change the concrete realities of ordinary people. So what we have done in the past few months of our existence in the politics of this country is to try and ensure that everything that we make, you will see very soon we are releasing our policy blueprint. The central disposition of that document is how does economic programs of the state, how does the political programming of the state, deployment of political leadership in the politics of our country and the rank and file of the movement, how does it reflect the collective aspiration of ordinary people? So that is the central question we intend to answer as CCC, that our programming, our intention when you get into government, the objective and at the center of every decision that is made must be the reflection of the concerns of the ordinary people in this country.
Yep. Let us first look at the critical issues before I begin to just test some of the things you are saying. Can you give us just a sneak preview into your policy? What is the policy? Because people have been saying you are policyless.
Thank you very much. That's a very important question, and I think that there's been intellectual dishonesty in the politics of this country, in particular issues around policies. One of the propositions we have made in responding to the crisis in this country, in the meantime, we've made ourselves very clear on key national questions. Number one is the issue of land. That's a big policy issue, and we've given our position to say, look, the land reform program in this country is irreversible. Our point of departure with our colleagues in Zanu is that for them, land is an end in itself. Our view as CCC is that land must be given value. We must bring land back into the market. We must bring value. We must give title to the land so that there is security to those who intend to finance through their ownership of land. Number two, we've made ourselves very clear on key national questions around how we want to resolve Zimbabwe's crisis. The first proposition we make, Bule, is around the energy sector. We think that in order to resolve the crisis in this country, we must have a rapid industrialization program, but that is anchored on resolving the energy crisis. We have made proposition that the energy crisis in this country must be resolved in the following three respects. Number one, let's deal with capacity generation. That is the first and most important thing. The regime has failed successfully so to deal with generation, whether it's in Wange 7 and 8, whether it's building of small hydroelectricity power stations in Manicaland because of its landscape. We have also even proposed that let's resolve the Patoka energy program so that we're able to generate at least 1,000 megawatts of electricity. And obviously that would need partnership with Zambia. We have also said on generation, Zimbabwe has the longest rates of sunshine in the African, one of the countries with the longest rates of sunshine during the day. We have said let's build solar as an important generation capacity of energy. How do we do it? We have even proposed through council. You know that we are in council. We have said we are able in Harare City Council alone to have solar farms to generate electricity for all the residents in Harare. And the extra electricity we generate, we can then sell to the national grid. But obviously, thanks to politics, those projects won't sell through. So solar is the biggest issue that we think the government must invest on. We have then said outside generation, we must also deal with transmission. Zimbabwe loses almost 4% of its electricity on transmission. Our cables are archaic, our cables are old. So we must deal with the question of transmission. Thirdly, we deal with the issue of demand side management. You know of scandals where Zanu Pf ministers were not paying electricity in their farms and so forth. So demand side management is also a big issue. Because our industrialization program in Zimbabwe will require us to have strong energy program. Number two, so this is just on the energy sector. Number two, we also propose a big economy. Obviously, we are going to unveil that in our document. But that economic framework, its macroeconomic framework, is based on the following issues. Number one, mining. We must review the Mines and Minerals Act in Zimbabwe. We must obviously deal with illicit financial flows. We lose billions of dollars. And you know of the Al Jazeera report that is coming up to tell the story in practical terms, how gold has been smuggled out of the country. But we have more than 68 minerals in this country. So the Minerals and Mines Act is an important document on our program to make sure that the mines sector contributes to the country's GDP. Number two, in our document, which is a holistic economic program, the macroeconomic framework of that document also focuses on how we are obviously going to leverage on foreign direct investment. So we add these things. Number three, we also talk about agriculture. Our difference with Zanu on agriculture is that we think that we must be able to finance agriculture. We must be able to deal with corruption. You know of what happens during Made's days with the Brazil scandal, which in turn contributed to the debt crisis in this country. Introduction of technology is also another big issue in our agriculture program, but we give that detail in our blueprint. Number four, we talk about the debt question. Zimbabwe has a debt that is almost 17.5 billion. How do we intend to resolve the debt question as CCC? The first thing, we propose that there must be an honest, scientific, independent debt audit. We must know how much money was borrowed from who, particularly the public debt, because you contribute to the debt resolution strategy. But you don't know how much money do we owe to who. It was borrowed to do what? When we got independence in this country, our debt was at almost 700 million. Right now, the debt is almost 17 billion. Major of obviously international financial issues like the World Bank, the IMF, Paris Club of Lenders, the Bank of England, and so forth. So we think that the first thing to resolve the debt question is about debt audit. Number two, we think that once we have a debt audit, we're able to deal with the question of ending our lack of relationship with the lenders, right? Which is obviously the repayment strategy. The strategies that have come before, particularly from the Ministry of Finance, have not been sufficient to deal with Zimbabwe's issue with creditors. So we must be able to deal with issue of repayment. And thirdly is obviously the aspect of making sure that we converse on the basis of highly indebted poor countries so that we're able to deal with some of the debt, particularly the one that was inherited from the Smith government. The other issue that we propose again in our policy blueprint is the issue of health. So outside the economy, we've got a bias towards social services. And one of it being the issue of how do we want to resolve the health crisis in our country. You know that Zimbabwe is a signatory to the Abuja Declaration on Health, which proposes that of 13% of the country's budget must go to health. That is not being done. We must obviously deal with questions of making sure that we grow our tax base so that ordinary people can be able to access health, and health that is not privatized. So health must be given to people for free. That is our proposition. We think that the government must be able to, and what we are saying is not our view only, but it's a constitutional prerequisite. So our document, in short, answers, and this time what we are doing differently from any political movement, we answer Zimbabwe's immediate political and economic questions and provide answers more quantitatively than qualitatively. So you have seen that most of the political movement wants to propose what must be done qualitatively. So we must build roads, infrastructure. We've got a rapid program around reconstruction, because our jobs plan is anchored around rapid reconstruction programming. So for example, we propose that we must decongest Harare, and when we're decongesting Harare, it means we're developing. So we are monetizing transformation to make sure that we build office parks outside Harare and all the major towns. So the decongestion of town on its own as a transformative agenda is going to be creating jobs. So this time what we do differently is that we are providing quantitatively. So in figures, in facts, in objectivity, in scientific terms, how we intend to resolve the crisis. So you see that our blueprint is going to be focusing more on the quantitative aspect, on the scientific and mathematical aspect of development, how we want to do it. So we give a huge economic base in terms of our proposition of the GDP, but we start from the existing current GDP to build a broad economic agenda. That agenda, we answer how we want to do it. For example, our annual growth rate is going to be very clear, so that economists and those who want to understand how we are going to be doing. So we are going to be putting it quantitatively, and we know that everyone is going to agree with us in respect of our model to develop this country. So these are some of our propositions that are going to be coming out in our document that is to be launched very soon.
So you mentioned that you are in local government. And many people have said that you have failed to deliver in local government. You are talking about being able to deliver at a larger national scale. You're talking about economic blueprints and policies when you have failed at the macro level. How do you talk?
Look, it's intellectually dishonest for anyone to say that our failure in council is based on our ability to lead the urban councils that we controlled. You know that the first and most immediate problem with council is that all our mayors are not executive mayors. They are ceremonial mayors. That's one. So that's the biggest issue.
So why do you put them there when you know they have no power?
Look, we have been given responsibility mandate by the people. So we've got a de jure mandate. We've got a legal mandate from the people. We don't have a de jure, a de facto mandate because of the interference, which is the second problem. The interference and total control of council by central government. You know that, Bule, for you to do anything in council, it has to be approved by central government. So the interference by central government makes it impossible for council to deliver on anything. Thirdly is the toxicity in our politics. We propose in our document reconstruction of the state, because that is the first and foundational political problem in this country. Zimbabwe has been doing elections since 1980, and most of these elections have been contested. And these elections being contested means that Zimbabwe is a contested state. The government is a contested government. It means there is lack of a social contract. There is no relationship between those who govern and those who are being governed. So that lack of a social contract means that there is no trust. So Zanu Pf now, because it's ruling without a popular mandate, it has to railroad itself to try and focus on power and control of political power, and that has led to the toxicity in our politics. If you see I was talking to one of our members of parliament in Mbari. There was a project that they wanted to do, a developmental project, where they wanted to build a clinic in Matapi. Zanu Pf organizes its people to go and disrupt that program. So the toxicity in that you see is born out of the legitimacy crisis, that those who govern want to force themselves into the people. Therefore, development has been relegated out of the politics. So it is going to be impossible for council to succeed as long as there is control of central government, a central government that has no vision. So the most immediate question we have to resolve is that Zimbabwe needs a new consensus. We must negotiate as Zimbabweans collectively that what is the Zimbabwe that we want collectively as a people. Once we have a new consensus, it means we have a negotiated social contract. And whoever is going to govern post-2023 has the mandate of the people. And obviously the benchmark is a free, fair and credible election. So that we resolve the toxicity and relegate this toxicity and politics and focus on development and transforming our country. Once we do that, it means we're able to resolve. And those powers that we think must be given to council are going to be given back, because those who be in central government are not looking at council as a competitor political, but are looking at council as an agent and a vehicle of transforming the local people in different parts of the country.
You talk about toxicity, but your party and your party supporters have been accused of being at the center of toxicity. In fact, they have used social media, especially Twitter, to insult, dehumanize, and relegate those with different opinions.
Look, the reason why CCC deployed myself and Advocate Mahere at the realm of the communications department is for the purpose of us to give the party's official positions and thinking and view on certain things. We have said, and we've said that very clearly, that for us as CCC, tolerance is one of the important values, and public discourse must demonstrate that kind of view. We believe that anyone with a diverging view must be listened to, because remember that even those we differ with help us to discover the truth. So we don't find enmity in those who differ with us or point at our inadequacies, because out of those we might differ, we might not agree fundamentally. I think that for me, the problem is when you lay your ideas and people challenge them on superior logic. You must not, in our respective view, feel that people are being intolerant. So there's a difference. We think that toxicity, insulting, and so forth, people must be challenged on the basis of ideas. Our difference fundamentally with Zanu is our proposition. We think that Zanu has failed to produce, propose, and implement policies that change the lives of ordinary people. So we believe that the debate in the politics of this country must be on the basis of superior logic. Let those with superior ideas thrive, because they are Zimbabweans. They've got the right to do so. The toxicity that you see and the value that you see is because for a long time in the politics of this country, there is a generation and a group of elites that believe that there's a divine right to rule over Zimbabwean people, that no any other person besides them have got the ability and the capability to lead this country. So that disposition is the one that has contributed to the toxicity of our country. You know how we've been condemned, how we've been named, you know that no, these ones are puppets and so forth. We have been actually been in the receiving end of such vile, but we have not blamed those that have called us. We have said, look, maybe you have a misunderstanding of who we are. We are patriotic Zimbabweans. We believe that we all have a duty to rebuild our country. So that is our belief, that is our position. And we've demonstrated that at all material times, despite that people can challenge our view, we don't think that people must not be able to challenge our proposition. People must be able to challenge our views. People must be able to, you know, say their views. We don't shoot the messenger. We shoot the message. We deal with the message. We might differ, but we receive the message, even if it makes us uncomfortable.
Ustalos, I want us to look at the path that you have walked as politicians. You argue that the CCC is a new baby, but when we trace your roots, we find your roots deep in the MDC, and you have walked the path with the MDC. You have held numerous positions in that old political party. And in that party, we have seen the politics of hate. We have seen people like Elton Mangoma being assaulted, people like Tendai Biti leaving the political party to form because of violence. We have seen Thokozani Kupe and Nelson Chamisa being divided and running in the past elections, in 2018 election, differently, even though they had belonged to the same political party. We have seen you guys now forming the CCC and leaving Douglas Monzero with the MDCT. I mean, all this has been rancor, has been fighting amongst comrades who have been in the same trenches. And up to now, you don't see eye to eye with the MDCT. In fact, we have tried to bring you to the same interview space and we have failed. But you talk about you being tolerant. Where is that tolerance? I don't see it, Ustalos.
No, thank you, Bule. You raise very important, historic questions. Let me put the perspective and answer it in sufficient terms. The MDC in its various forms and facets is part of our past, right? We, for example, myself as Ostalos, I was part and parcel of the democratic movement, the MDC. It is part of my past. It is part of our past. We founded the MDC. We made a decision that because of the contradictions and the question that has arisen at the time, we agreed without doubt as ordinary Zimbabweans that the MDC, we must bury it before it buries us. Right? And we made that strategic decision to make sure that we collectively come together and find a new alternative vehicle. So when we belong to the MDC is part of our past, so we cannot shed away that past, that no MDC and so forth, because we belonged there, right? But CCC is a new alternative vehicle. The intention of CCC is not to solve the inadequacies of Zanu, but the inadequacies of the politics that had existed in this country for the past 4 decades, both within the MDC, Zanu Pf, and all the political party existing. I'll give you an example. One of the problems that was very cynical in the MDC was the issue of primary elections. You would see that every time when political parties go for primary elections, there is violence, there is withdrawal and intolerance and so forth. CCC agreed that we must be able to have a vehicle that listens to the concerns of the people in the deployment of public officials and look at merit as a basis of making sure that we deploy capable people both in council and in parliament. So our focus is to make sure that we address the challenges that some of us faced in the MDC, some people seeing in Zanu Pf, and all the political institutions in this country, so that we are able to build a credible alternative to the politics of the past. But
Ostalos, if you do away with primary elections and you look at merit and the like, how do you address the issue of democracy? How do you address the issue of popularity? Because politics is about the popularity, is about the will of the people.
Of course.
It's not about your certificates, is it?
Look, popularity is a merit in politics. It might not be a bureaucratic competence, but it is a qualification, because politics at the end of the day is about the numbers. So for you to get political legitimacy, you must be supported by the people. So our consensus candidate selection process does not relegate. In fact, it strengthens where traditionally political movements will only call a few people to select. That was the structure of a primary election. That only select members of a district, select a member of parliament. But this time we say beyond the membership, the ordinary people, the stakeholders, that is your vendors, your residents association, your churches, your schools, and all the stakeholders in the community and ordinary people have to have a say.
How do they have a say when you can't vote? How do you measure the say of the people?
You have to go to the people and build consensus. So it means where you are going to having few people blessed, sitting down and say 35 of us have cast a ballot. We say no. We go to Kwazana and call all the interested stakeholders in Kwazana. It doesn't matter where they are coming from, right? So that all these people can put their voice to say, here in Kwazana, we know this particular individual, he is capable, we know him, and to us he is the best. Why are we doing so? Primary elections were limited in their scope in terms of making sure that the candidate reflects the will of the people. The complaints that was across the political parties for the past 2 decades is that you have given us an MP, we don't want that MP. What turned out is apathy. I'll give you the quantitative example of it. In most of the constituencies in 2018, if you go and start the MDC, President Chamisa had more votes than members of parliament, because people in the localities had no preference of the candidates because of the limited scope of the primary election. So what happens now is the expansion of the process to make sure that ordinary people are able to add their voice in terms of who they think is the best candidate. So eventually, or in practical terms, the popular candidate becomes the candidate that leads the people, not the one that is liked by the leadership at the top, not the one that is liked by the leadership in the province, not the one that is liked by those that traditionally will conduct elections. Because that is the vices of the past, that those who conduct elections can have conversations and say, okay, don't worry, we'll tailor-make the process to suit your interests. We've said no to that. Let members of the community reflect. So it means at the end of the day, our process is going to produce the most popular candidate, both in council, in parliament, and in the presidency.
Is that why you don't have structures?
Look, the debate on structures is an evergreen subject. And our proposition is that for you to run a successful organization, what you need is an infrastructure. That is our disposition. We believe that CCC is a citizen vehicle of change. And what CCC needs for a democratic breakthrough in this country is an infrastructure to make sure that we move towards a democratic breakthrough. There are people who have been in this country demanding structures from CCC with the intention to make sure that they achieve their objective. One of them is obviously infiltration. The other is obviously having people that they can be able to deploy. And the most important one has always been to use these structures as a basis to sponsor further decay of the alternative. You know of the famous constitutional case judgment, right? It's individuals given responsibility by ordinary people to become official structures such that they get the local standard, to get the legitimacy legal, to take the party back into the cause. We are tired of that politics. We think that a captured judiciary has derailed our democratic struggle, and our focus is never, will never, Comrade Bully, until a democratic breakthrough play into the detector's manual. But we have read it, we have understood it. What we must be able to answer is how do we effectively organize our movement from below? Yeah, and that question is answered by us having a sufficient infrastructure. That's why you see us present everywhere. It means that the infrastructure is there and is well oiled. But
Ostalos, before you go there, I want to understand your chief reason of not having structures, of not naming your hand a hand and a leg, so that it does what it does, is because you want to avoid infiltration. Is it not easier to infiltrate an organization that does not have a structure in itself?
Like I said,
because I can then rock up at any point and become an agent of, supposedly an agent for change, and call myself a CCC agent for change, and begin to act in a manner that will ensure that you don't win elections.
Look, you see, CCC, my brother, to answer it in black and white terms.
Not in yellow.
We, in black and white, we are a new movement, but we've been in the democratic trenches for a long time. And we've learned from the past. The debate is actually not on the existence of the structure. The debate that you see is about the existence of the structure on paper. Our enemies want us to give them the list of who is doing what, where, and how. So the demand is not about the existence or lack of it thereof. It is about, are they on paper? If they are, tell us who we are. I'll tell you why I'm saying so. Since our formation, we have been organizing. We won by-elections. Those by-elections were not organized by individuals. Those were organized by party champions across the entire part of the country. We have done rallies across the length and breadth of our country. What we have not done is to put our structure on paper and give it to those who want it, because we don't think that we have an obligation as a movement to submit our structures to anyone, because we know each other. You have never heard that there's a clash in the movement when we do our programming, because we know who does what, when, and how. So it means, in practical terms, it's a structure that does not exist, but is existing.
You are basically saying that you have secret structures.
They are not secret.
You are nicodemously structuring the party.
They are not secret, but the structure has not been made public to those who want to know the structure. The progressive citizens know. If you go, for example, in Kwazana and say, I want to meet CCC, you locate CCC at district level. If you go and say, I'm from this street, I want to join CCC, you will find a CCC street point person there. If you say, okay, I don't want the street, I want the ward, you will find a CCC ward point person there, organizing, driving the movement from below. And that structure is repeated up to the top. What we have not done is to put it in black and white so that we empower those who have been derailing the democratic struggle.
Amazing. But you are talking about leading a country which has constitutional values and norms. But we don't know your constitutional values and norms, and have never tested whether the CCC can stick to its constitutional values and norms. How do we trust you?
Thank you. That's a very important question, Bolen. What happens with the formation of a movement is a process. We have been in the process of building our new movement. And one of the important things of building this movement is obviously making sure that we've got all the assets, we've got all the prerequisites of a movement. What is the difference to those that have been demanding all these documents, like I say, is that they want us to work at the dictates of their own pace. If we are disorganized, as they say, we're not going to be receiving all the assaults. You see our movements being blocked, our rallies being blocked, our people being beaten up, particularly in the countryside. The only thing that we cannot do is to put the cart before the horse. We have got processes, and maybe for the purpose of clarity, I'll give you some of the processes that are going to be coming up so that you become aware. Number one, we are going to be in the process, going to be launching our documents. Our documents means that we're going to be launching our blueprint, the New Zimbabwe document, which is basically our policy framework. We're going to be launching our alternative policies. The diaspora policy is going to be coming out, which answers how we intend to organize the diaspora to contribute both in the elections and the post-election economic framework of our country. We are also going to be launching at the movement. It means we are going to be putting out our documents in the launch. The only thing that will not happen is for those processes to happen at the dictates of our proponents. We have only released what is necessary now because it responds to the day-to-day questions. For example, electoral reforms are a key issue. We have raised a document called a pre-election pact on reforms because that document answers the present question, right? When the election season gets to its home stretch, all the necessary documents are going to come answering to the material times of the day. What we cannot do is to jump into processes. We prepare ourselves. We do what is necessary, right? Like we have said, we have launched documents that are necessary for now because what is important now are reforms. That's why you have seen us putting out our reform document. We have not only done that, we have shown our competence through our alternative electoral bill. Our amendment bill that we produced was important because the debate was happening then. That's why we said this is our thinking on what must happen, right? Because that is what is needed. When the time of putting out our candidates, putting out our program comes, you are going to see us putting these things. When the time for us to launch the movement, we cannot launch the movement without documents. We cannot launch the movement without membership. We cannot launch the movement without a website. All these things are processes that we'll do when that time comes. What we cannot do is to put all those things out because someone who wants to know says do it now. We are going to do it at the right time to answer to the material questions of that time.
You speak about the assaults that you have faced. These assaults include the arrest of your members. Job Scala is now close to a year in remand prison without trial. Your rallies have been blocked right, left, and center. You've been accused of failing to find an answer to these assaults. You have been labeled weak, directionless, and without a solution.
Look, we have been accused of this thing even when we launched the new movement. They said that the movement is not going to get anything in parliament or in council, that Mr. Munzora is going to have seats in parliament because his rational disputation strategy works, and everything. But we defied all the odds against difficult circumstances. You know that, Bule, for you to operate in the politics of this country, the greatest financing comes from the Political Financing Act. We were stripped off of those funding, went into a by-election with absolutely zero funding. We went to a by-election without democracy. You know that most of our rallies were not happening. You saw the violence that happened in Kokwe, the violence in Matopo, but we won against all odds. In Bulilima, the seat that we won had been controlled by Zanu since 1980. We made a stronghold in the countryside to demystify the mystery that CCC is an open party and not present in the countryside. What we've not been able to do is to suffer the pressure of those that want us to tweet our strategy and expose our strategic interventions to these questions. We deal with it as it comes. We have got a clear crisis response strategic interventions to the problems that we face. CCC is clear in terms of its goal. Our goal is to attain political power through elections. There are people who believe in other methods to attain political power. Zimbabwe is a democratic country. We want freedom. Even if it comes through other people, we'll embrace it, because we don't want freedom only because it's coming from CCC. We believe that if freedom comes tomorrow, even if it comes through any other political movement, it's good for the people, because it's about how do we attain freedom for the betterment of ordinary people, even if we are not the vehicle of choice. But as long as there is a safe water for everyone to drink, as long as there are jobs for young people, as long as people can get medicine in hospitals, we will be happy as CCC, because we exist in a polity that is able to absorb and solve the issues of ordinary people. But
Ustalos, Scala's family are without a father for almost a year. They want their father back. You have no solution.
No, look, let me correct that. And I want to appeal to your conscience in my response. And Job Sikala knows this. There is no struggle without bruises. There is no struggle without pain. When we made a commitment to fight against dictatorship, we know that we knew at the time, and we know now, that the greatest threats that we face are in the following respect. Number one is that they are going to scandalize us. Number two, they are going to try and co-opt us into joining the gravy train. Number three, we knew that when we are joining this genuine democratic struggle, we're going to face jail sentencing and persecution. And lastly, we knew that we are going to almost, if possible, lose our lives, right? We made this commitment to still fight regardless of these challenges and open threats to our life. I have been to jail. I was abducted and tortured in Zanu Pf headquarters. When I thought that perpetrators are going to be arrested, it's me who got arrested with the injuries. I was taken from Zanu Pf headquarters to Harare Central Prison, from there to Chikurupi Maximum Prison. I stayed there for more than 100 days in Chikurupi Maximum Prison, and by then Zanu Pf was very clear that any judge who attempts to release these people is going to face the consequences. So you talk of judicial captain. Our brother and leader and champion has been failed by the judiciary. A judiciary that takes instructions from politicians. A judiciary that is used as a vehicle for vengeance against those that differ with the establishment. That is the problem, the fundamental problem that we face. Majority of our champions in CCC are in court in and out for different charges. Some you insulted the authority of the president, some you stole land, some different charges to different leaders. We are in the receiving end of state-sponsored repression, right? But there's been a nefarious objective to try and twist it, to try and make the victims perpetrators, right? Job knows this, that we made a commitment, like I said, to be in this struggle as long as is necessary. That is the nature of any democratic struggle, when you are genuine, when you are authentic. I might come out of this interview and face a jail term. What you will not hear from me is for me to then say, no, my comrades have abandoned me, because I know from the days I joined the International Socialist Organization, that is what I was trying to understand. That I might be here in front of cameras today and be in prison tomorrow, or in a death bag, right? That is the nature of a struggle against fascism. But we've made that commitment, we've made the pledge that we are in this struggle as long as it's necessary, even if it is to cost our lives. That is the nature of this struggle.
This is the Free Talk. Please join me just after this break. Welcome back. This is the Free Talk, and I'm still with Ostalos Ziziva, the deputy spokesperson of the CCC. Now, Ziziva, we're talking about the elections reform. So it looks like we're going to these elections without the electoral reforms. We're also going into this election with a delimitation report that most of your parliamentarians and even your party have said is nothing short of an unconstitutional document. But we are still being real. We are still going into election like that. And some of your supporters have said there is no point going to these elections because they are predetermined. What is the response from your party?
Look, there's a deliberate attempt to try and make ordinary people apathetic. The regime has deliberately sponsored a narrative that elections don't work. And that narrative has been spread, particularly in the urban centers, targeting young people, say, no, look, voting doesn't help, doesn't change anything. If voting didn't matter, the regime was going to be calling elections with competition. The problem in Zimbabwe, like I said, that the foundational political problem in this country is the issue of contested elections, which produces a contested leadership. We have made it very clear as CCC that, look, it's in the interest even of those that differ with us to have a conversation, a pre-election pact that binds us as political actors around the necessary reforms. There are deep-seated fundamental reforms that we think cannot be achieved today. But there are minimum reforms that we think must be achieved. They help the credibility of whoever is going to govern, right? It's not for the benefit of CCC. If ZANU believes that they are going to win the election, they must also focus on their credibility in the post-2023.
Do you think Zanu Pf cares about it?
They might not care, but it damages the credibility. And let me tell you the danger of having election without democracy. It spreads in the conscience of ordinary people an alternative way of changing governments, right? And that alternative way of changing governments does not benefit even those in ZANU. That's why we think that the basis of changing government in our respective view as a constitutional democratic country must be via elections.
But
doing
Ostalos,
so,
but
we
Ostalos,
must make sure that the election is credible.
But Ostalos, you have seen, you can't have meetings. You have been trying to get the voters' roll. You can't get it. What miracle do you think is going to happen?
It's not going to be a miracle, Bule. It's going to be a scientific victory. The first things first. For ordinary people and ordinary Zimbabweans who think there must be change in this country, the national call must be making sure that every Zimbabwean registers to vote. We have more than 2 million young people that are not registered to vote. 98% of those are unemployed. They are working at the blessing of an empty stomach and a jobless existence. These young people have been made to believe that voting does not change, and therefore they become apathetic. Once these young people register between the 12th and the 21st of March this year, it means Zimbabwe can have the much needed democratic breakthrough. It's not a miracle, it's science. Number two, because it's difficult for an ordinary person to go and question power when they are not a source of power to those in authority. The reason why the government of Zimbabwe can be held accountable by ordinary people is because ordinary people don't play a part in the politics. If I voted for you, I'm able to come and question you because I understand that your power is born out of my vote. So that is our conscious drive to ordinary Zimbabweans. That for you to be able to question power, you must be able to be a source to that power. And your only way to be a source to that power is to make sure that you put your eggs on the ballot. Once you do that, we are able to overwhelm the fascism that we have today. And 2023 presents that unique opportunity. Let me tell you, that problem is not only just an election issue. It's also going to be a developmental challenge. We highlight it in our blueprint that our major problem is going to be around social engineering. How are we going to address this generation that believes that they can be wealthy without labor? That believes that Chiangwa is an idol, or that is a scandalous guy, Chivayo. How do we socially engineer this youth bulge that has been made to believe that you can wake up tomorrow with a lot of money, with a lot of wealth without labor? So it's going to be a big issue. So it's not just an election issue, but it's also a developmental problem, which we answer how we want to resolve it in our blueprint.
Ostalos, your leader, Nelson Chamisa, has been accused of silence and just tweeting verses. This has been an issue around some of your supporters, especially those who are visible on social media.
No, that's an intellectually dishonest analysis of the champion-in-chief, our president, Advocate Nelson Chamisa. In our politics, we campaign in poetry and govern in prose. So social media, particularly Twitter, those who own Twitter call it the public square. It's a platform for people to air their feelings. It's like, I see you, Pule, supporting your team every day. I cannot say it because your team has lost or you are posting so much about your team. It doesn't mean that heart and soul is not functioning. An intellectually dishonest submission and analysis of the leader is those that don't want to engage with this content. A few weeks ago, President Chamisa tweeted his energy program. He answered succinctly how he thinks his government, and some of us being the anchors of that leadership collective, are going to resolve the crisis we have of load shedding. And very few of these naysayers would engage in the content of those submissions. But they'll wait for a Sabbath so that when he posts, like you watch your game on Sunday and post about your team. President Chamisa is a Christian. He's got that conscious right to talk about his Christianity and his religious belief. But those submissions are not his policies. His policies are there to see, for example, I've said that President Chamisa spearheaded the production of our pre-election pact on reforms, right? He presented it to different governments through his deploys in parliament. President Chamisa has also produced his own alternative thinking on different issues, whether it's on health, whether it's on education, whether it's about young people going out to register to vote. But the dishonest is trying to relegate and suppress that particular content and debate with one thing, because the intention is to become an opposition to the opposition, right? That's why we don't engage those things, because they are not intellectually capable to justify their submissions, to say, no, you are posting verse. A verse is not a police. A verse is a verse, right? You must invite President Chamisa when you think he has not answered sufficiently certain questions, and ask him to say, what is your thinking on Zimbabwe's foreign direct investment program, or what is your thinking on ending Zimbabwe's international isolation, right? President Chamisa has said this, not only in rallies, he has said it in boardrooms, in press conferences, and they suppress that kind of content so that they become an alternative to the alternative. So the sub-minimal intention of that particular narrative is to try and discredit President Chamisa as an alternative leader. But the people of Zimbabwe are very clear, Comrade Bule. They are not only clear in terms of that, they've expressed it in different research institutions like POI, they've expressed it to institutions that do research, that we trust Advocate Nelson Chamisa as the leader. If people think, which is a respectful view, think that he doesn't answer. So let me actually add the other issue of voter registration. I don't think there's a leader in this country who has made a call to young people to register to vote than President Chamisa. Go and look at all his rallies across the country. Whether he addresses in Mutoko, he ends or starts with the call to register to vote. He has done that since the formative stages of CCC. He has done that today to make that call, but they will suppress it because they've got their own agenda, they've got their own objective. But we keep moving because we are focused on the big idea to change the lives of ordinary people.
You spoke about the policy of ending international isolation. Now, let us talk about this issue around sanctions. What is the CCC policy around sanctions?
Look, we are going to put that in our blueprint very clear, but we have said it very clear as CCC. And I think that, in fact, the RBZ has done justice and the Lord's work in clarifying the 4 decades of propaganda that Zimbabwe cannot be able to trade internationally, cannot get loans because it has been sanctioned, right? The propaganda was demystified by the RBZ, and we think that sufficiently answers those who have been questioning, in that regard. We'll give you an example that we answer in our blueprint. We say in our document to end Zimbabwe's, particularly, for example, we want to resolve the debt question or our access. We don't get funding, we don't get loans because we're a bad debtor. Mugabe decided to abandon our debt clearance program in the early 2000s, right? Leading to the ballooning of the debt in Zimbabwe. That is the basis. Even a Chinese bank a few years ago was recorded, I think it was under Patrick Chinamasa then, that they cannot lend Zimbabwe a loan because Zimbabwe, not because it's on sanction, but because it is a bad debt. So that is the fundamental problem that we must deal with. So ending Zimbabwe's international isolation again is not a foreign policy issue. To us, it is a domestic issue. We think that for us to end Zimbabwe's international isolation, we must resolve the decay of the political in our country. Because at the end of the day, I would quote even, remember that the president of the African Development Bank was here in the country. And when questioned around how do we end Zimbabwe's challenges in the economy, particularly with the bank, his submissions were that we must resolve the politics. Basically, he was saying that it is the politics stupid. So to us, ending Zimbabwe international isolation is not a foreign policy issue, but a domestic issue. Let's address the issue of rule of law. Let's address what is happening to Honorable Scala. Let the justice system be able to deliver to Zimbabweans across the political divide or religious divide, right? Let's resolve the crisis of corruption, right? That is the biggest issue. Let's resolve the issues of extraction in this country. Once we resolve that, it means when we resolve the domestic, we are automatically resolving the international.
We are running out of time, Ostalus, but it would be unfair for me to leave you without discussing the parallels that have been drawn between yourselves as CCC and your leader, Nelson Chamisa, against Peter Obi of Nigeria in the just ended Nigerian elections. Now, he supposedly didn't believe in structures the way you didn't believe in structures and ended up third in this election, although with the 6 million vote under his name.
Look, that's why I said for us, I'm a political scientist by training. I don't want to engage in political debate on submissions that are ontological. I think that we must debate, particularly when we do comparative politics, we must be basing on submissions that are empirical. First and foremost, the political circumstance in Nigeria and Zimbabwe are different. I'll give you one empirical example. For example, there was low voter turnout. The vote share was extremely low. That's number one. Number two, the institutions themselves that they are being compared are not comparable. You can't compare CCC as the biggest movement in Zimbabwe with Peter Obi. The two movements are different. Peter Obi was a de facto independent candidate. We are not an independent. We don't have an independent candidate. We have got a movement which targets to win the presidency, which targets to win parliament, a majority, by the way, and wins majority in local authorities, right? It means we want to have representation in parliament, we want to have representation in local authorities, targeting 32 out of 32 urban councils and half of the rural district councils, and a parliamentary majority and a presidential victory, right? So the circumstances are different in terms of the form, the character of the vehicles of that particular individuals going into an election. Chamisa has a vehicle. Chamisa has an infrastructure. CCC is a vehicle of change that exists across the length and breadth of our country. That's number one. And the assumption already going into an election, Chamisa is not a new political figure in the politics of our country. President Chamisa again is also coming into an election having members in parliament, in council. So he already has a political vehicle that is existing. He has a huge support base and a biggest political movement, which was not the circumstance with our brother and friend Peter Obi in Nigeria. So to do the comparative analysis, in my view, might be missing the point.
What is your prediction for the 2023 general elections?
I think that if the assumption is that we're going to have a relatively free and fair election, we're going to have a huge victory for the president, our basis of that is obviously not our wish-wash thinking or prediction by anyone, but is scientific. We base that on the researches that have been done by political scientists and researchers, one of them being Poi, that majority of Zimbabweans prefer President Chamisa ahead of Mr. Mnangagwa. A recent also research coming from London also predicted a preference of Zimbabweans of President Chamisa ahead of Mr. Mnangagwa. The feeling that we've had capturing voices from ordinary people in the country is that they prefer President Chamisa ahead of Mr. Mnangagwa here locally. The biggest hassle or our investment in this election is going to be around parliamentary majority. How do we make sure that we have competent members of parliament, capable, that are connected with the grassroots, so that we're able to have a legislative arm to govern? That is now our focus, to build a strong parliamentary infrastructure, and again to go to council and build a credible urban council program. So now, unlike ever, we are building a pre-election urban councils program that we want to unveil to the people, so that experts, former mayors, different players can be able to input to say, this is going to be your urban council's agenda to transform the lives of ordinary people. When we do that, we also place before the ordinary people that if we are to win in council, this is going to be the caliber of people who are going to be at the helm of council, particularly mayors and people who run committees, because it's on the basis of competence, so that people can vote and make a choice, having looked at the type of people that we want to bring. So at the end of the day, we want to resolve the leadership question in both the president, parliament, and the local authorities.
I sat with the MDC leader Douglas Monzora, who said he would win by 66%. I sat with the Democratic Union of Zimbabwe president, who also declares that he wants to be the candidate, and he said he would win by around 77%. What is the percentage looking like for you?
Look, I think that for us, people have got the right to be ambitious, but people don't have to become prophets of their own, challenges. We think that for us, an honest assessment is based on the preference right? The percentage of victory is not going to be determined by our wishy-washy thinking. It's going to be determined how ordinary people are going to come out to vote and their voting choice, right? What we can only do as CCC is to lay bare our policies, is to lay bare our intention to change the lives of ordinary people, our records of what we've done under very difficult circumstances, and to make sure that we convince and appeal on the basis of superior logic to ordinary people so that people vote for us, right? And when people go out in their numbers, we are assured of a democratic breakthrough. What we are assured now, quantitatively, is that we are going to be ahead. President Chamisa is going to be ahead of Mr. Mnangagwa in these elections. What we are assured is that we are going to work and make sure that we get a parliamentary majority and win the majority. In fact, win 32 out of the 32 urban councils that are existing. That's what we are aware of. It's scientific, it's objective. We don't want to give figures as if we are prophets. We have made our own analysis on where we are going to be winning, and that remains books for our strategic processes and for those that are involved in those processes.
Thank you very much for joining me here on this, the Free Talk, in partnership with the Frederick Newman Foundation for Freedom. Now, we believe that people should be able to speak freely and honestly around issues in their country, and everyone must be heard. This is our country, all of us. And regardless of our differences in opinion, we must have free talk to change the way we govern ourselves and to improve the way we take our country into the future. Now, Ostalos, I'll give you just 2 minutes to talk to the people of Zimbabwe, look the people of Zimbabwe in the eye, and tell them what the CCC, things that you feel are important that we didn't discuss. Just
thank you very much. To fellow Zimbabweans, we thank you for the support. That's all we can say, is to say thank you, Zimbabwe, for embracing the new, for supporting your movement, for helping us build a credible alternative. Look out for our program of action that is going to become as we enter into the shadows of the election. We have no doubt, as your leadership collective, that CCC is going to emerge victorious, but it also begins with you. Young people, you must register to vote. Your voice is coming from your vote, and that voice is your power, and your power, with your power you can change the world. We believe that this is an occasion for Zimbabweans across the walks of life to come together and open the future whom the present is holding in suffocation. I thank you.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Ostalos, for joining us on this, the Free Talk. And congratulations, by the way, on your scholarship. When are you leaving?
No, I'll be starting from here.
You'll be studying from here. You have decided that you will be in the trenches while this year studying. Amazing. Now, this is the Free Talk, and I am your host as usual, Dara Blessed Mhlanga, and we'll be having this conversation. We are going to be, this Free Talk is open to all political parties, to all political players who believe that they have what it takes to run and govern this country. Our doors are open. You can just give us a ring or just email us, and we will be able to host you as we discuss going into these elections. We are going to go deep into the policies. We are going to go deep beyond the rhetoric, beyond the political gamesmanship, to give you Zimbabweans the reason to understand why you should be involved in these electoral processes. We answer the question, so what? We make you care. We are the alternative. And this is the Free Talk in proud partnership with Frederick Newman Foundation for Freedom. I'm yours, Dara. Until next time.
Chuna eka satanyika